Hi, this is Jam and Chats, and I'm here with Gillan Edgar, who is a songwriter and multi-instrumentalist. I am also here with Liam Morson, who is a composer and a pianist. We're going to jam and chat. Jamming is just when we're just making up music. It's all improvised. But first we're going to have a chat. Welcome, guys. Thank you for being here.
Hello.
Hello.
Nice
Yeah, fun to be here.
So, music to me is very much a spiritual experience. Whether it's writing, when you get into that kind of meditative state, or if you're jamming with someone, you almost have that kind of almost telepathic connection. So what I'd like to know, what your spiritual beliefs are, and if any, how do they relate to music for you?
I wasn't expecting such a huge
Gosh.
question straight
Wow.
in there. Yeah.
I consider myself an atheist, really, if I drill down into it. But I'm really taken with the idea of spirituality. So I dabble, let's say. And I want there to be something other, and I battle with that all the time because I'm such a scientifically minded and, in my opinion, grounded thinker, you know? But like you say, there is magic in music, and it's trying to work out what is that magic? Are we inventing that, or does it actually come from somewhere other? You know, so I'm trying to reconcile both, I guess, when I'm creating or getting lost in music. How about you, Liam?
Well, I think there's magic in the physical and the scientific anyway, isn't there? A lot of people now might agree that we could talk about mysticism outside of the scientific realm, but you can actually see a lot of what we might otherwise consider to be magic in science, and just because we understand it and we have a pretty decent idea of how it operates, shouldn't necessarily kill the magic, should it? But I would say agnostic for myself, because it seems to encompass that willingness to accept some new information and not have, I haven't made my mind up. But I feel spiritual. I feel like there is something going on when 2, 3, 4, 5, 100,000 people sit in the same space and do something together. There's something going on, isn't there, I think? Yeah. And when we make music, maybe it's a tool of communication. I see it as amongst other things, it's a tool of communication. So we don't just communicate verbally anyway, we communicate non-verbally, we communicate through gesture, sign, movement, looks, and that's just without music. So when we add music into the mix, we've got an even wider range of tools of communication. So it would make sense to me that it would allow us to connect on a deeper level, purely on the basis that it's given us more communicative options.
Yeah, wordless. Or can be wordless.
Yeah.
A richer palette to sort of paint what you're feeling and what you're thinking, and ways you can overlap with each other, maybe.
Is that Richard? I didn't know his name. Richard. Richard. I thought you were referring to Richard Pallet, who's some guy that you know.
I draw on the work of Richard Pallet, who said that it gives us a much richer palette.
I thought we were going to be doing one of those chats where people start quoting names of people, and then I'm in trouble now. Yeah,
I
can't do that game.
I've done no homework, so
Not
don't start quoting people at me. What about you, Matt? What's your?
Well, I think my belief is that it's all creation. I'm very much a believer of different dimensions. So the channel's called Sounds from the Fifth, essentially, and that's because my belief is that all creative ideas come from the fifth dimension.
Right.
And I think in some ways I just believe we're just vessels, and I've experienced that in an altered state of mind where I've been playing. And I've just become so aware I'm not the one actually playing. It's something else, this connection. Almost like when you're in the flow state.
Yeah.
You know, when you're just flowing. And it's interesting talking to people about the flow state because it's different for everyone, isn't it? And I think like for me, I go somewhere else when I go to the flow state. I leave the stage and I'm somewhere and it's a beautiful place. And you know, sometimes I'll come back around, I'm like, fuck, I'm here. I'm on the stage like... So I'd like to hear about what your thoughts are on the flow state. Like, have you had that kind of experience, or is it more of like a inner experience?
When I hear you talk about it in those terms, I'm very envious of that kind of being completely lost. Because I'm not sure if I've ever been completely lost in something creative. I'm always maybe second guessing myself or thinking, how clever is this? Or is this good? Or is that, instead of that pure just creating something for creativity's sake, you know, or tapping into that thing that is other, that is elsewhere, that you're kind of bringing to life here in this dimension. Yeah, I don't know, I'd like to feel a bit of that. Maybe today we will.
I see it as an aspiration. That is a goal you aspire towards achieving. You don't necessarily achieve it very often, if at all, but you aim yourself in a context like this anyway, where we're not playing Brown Eyed Girl for 200 wedding guests. We're trying to access music for music's sake. In this context, it's an aspiration to cast off the learnt movements and thoughts and roots and forms that we've spent a long time learning and using as our primary tool of communication in a lot of the music that we do. So if it's what I would consider to be work music, where we're playing music of other people and it has to be successfully in recreating something, it's a completely different goal, isn't it? And when we're doing that, we have to use the conventions that we've learned to realize that, to make it work, to make it successful. So they're inbuilt within your process. The more of that you do, the harder it is to get rid of them and purely just exist with, like, the more, I feel like the more likely I am to be familiar with this instrument, the less likely I am going to be able to get away from the things I've learned on it.
Yeah.
So you'd be better putting me on this. and I would probably have a more direct line of communication to what is my inner creativity, because I don't know what to do on that. So all I can do is what comes out.
You get caught up in the patterns that you've learned.
It is that,
just because of the familiarity. And
but I'm not a multi-instrumentalist. You guys are. So does that change the way that you you feel about what's learned on the instrument and what gets in the way?
Possibly, yeah. I don't know. I guess it's the context that you're performing in. Like you say, when I'm creating and writing stuff, I guess there is no audience really apart from the imagined one in my head that might hear the stuff I'm creating. So you are kind of free to freak out and do whatever you like and make mistakes, and it doesn't really matter when that pressure of it's got to be correct is in the room.
Yeah,
it's a totally different kind of expression, isn't it?
Yeah.
When it comes to jamming, for instance, what do you think that is? When you again, it's like that telepathic thing. When you know where someone's going to go, and you know, and you could say that's down to playing with someone loads of time. But there's those times when you get on stage with someone you've never met before in your life, and you just have that connection straight away, and you just know exactly what they're going to do or where they're going to go. So how would you guys explain that, would you say?
I mean, sometimes it's just serendipity, but I know exactly what you mean. Like, even in the context of what we do when we do our covers gigs, sometimes I might do a strange little fill on the guitar or something rhythmically, and Nick, the drummer, does exactly the same thing. So in some way we've both tapped into this weird, wouldn't it be funny if we did this independently of each other and done it and like, So that's a very kind of like mainstream way of that serendipity presenting itself.
And that's not even a response from you doing, you both arrived there.
We're both like, it'd be funny if we did this.
In a response to what was happening at that point in time with the music, I guess, in some way. But yeah, you're tapping into the completely out there, wild, spontaneity of music on quite a controlled covers gig.
Yeah, and then cool. In some way we both landed on the same idea or deviation, if you like. So yeah, I think, finding that common deviation is pretty special when it happens. But I don't really get a chance to explore that much, not in that kind of context. So it's, you might have more experience with that than me, with the sort of jam nights that you've had and things. And
I've clocked up some hours exploring how to share ideas without really being able to sit and talk, because you're already all playing and it's quite loud. And there's hand signals,
gestures,
as useful or useless as they might be. But then there's also there's convention, and this kind of dampens the exciting, the kind of the magic of it a little bit, to say that there's convention guiding some of this. But there is, and every artwork has a framework, and music's no different. So it does hang on a certain framework, and there's an expectation that this thing might happen next if that thing's just happened.
Yeah.
Now you might choose to subvert that expectation which is just as useful and actually might be just as predictable. Like, we know we're not going to do that thing that the audience expects us to do. We're going to do this other thing.
Yeah.
And that's a convention as well. So it by no means dampens anything to refer to the fact that there are conventions. I see it as the framework on which we can hang our creativity and our spontaneity. Like a lecturer once said to me years ago, in terms of composing and writing, a composer needs restriction, needs limits, boundaries. Otherwise, you've just got the infinite, and there's no shape to that. You can't grab it. You can't conceive of it. It's too big.
It's nothing more stultifying than any option you could possibly make.
So it doesn't have to be, let's say, musical form. It could be any framework. I can't conceive of anything else right now. Maybe we can explore what. Okay, let's say that the framework is that we all three of us think about an autumn day and try and make that's a framework, because there's a common idea then that we can hang our creativity onto. Yeah,
be mostly cowbell for me then, in this context.
Absolutely, if that's where you go.
It's the percussion instrument of the autumn for me. But yeah,
the autumn bell.
Yeah, completely free expression has never really appealed to me, like free jazz. It's kind of a joke trope, free jazz, where it's just noise.
Impossible, isn't it?
Because maybe there's nothing to latch onto. There's got to be something in there for me. So cut to me in 10 minutes, like doing whatever, nothing.
I mean, some of the stuff you were playing before was
it was a bit free jazz, but I was just having fun though.
Free jazz all over it.
That wasn't a serious jam. Yeah, it's funny that how much of what you create in spontaneous situations is born of knowing those forms and those conventions. How far can you actually deviate from something that you know is an established thing? That's what I
think you could keep digging down even to your free jazz guys, and at the heart of it for me there's still convention, even if it's just ideas of what we call musical verticality, where greater is better or higher is greater, or very simple concepts of volume, loud, quiet, high note, low note. There's still some sort of, they're still imbued with convention. They still represent something in our understanding of music.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I don't think it is completely unencumbered by convention.
Yeah.
It can't be. So even at the level of free jazz, even though they're completely open to what note comes to the next, it's still. I don't. This is interesting. This is the point where I'm like, I'm speculating. I'm not saying this for sure at all. This is where I'm speculating. Yeah. I don't know.
Hot take: the freest music possible is where nobody plays a single note. Again, you're completely free of all conventions.
Sure.
That's true freedom of expression in music.
It's like that thing where you have an idea for something, whether it's music related or just any kind of project, and you don't follow through with it. And then a few weeks later or a few months later, you see someone else doing the exact same idea. Have either of you experienced that?
Yeah, a couple of times, yeah.
And it's like, there's this idea that, I can't remember who said it because I'm terrible with names, but it's this concept that all ideas are seeded to us and seeded to multiple people, and whoever does it first achieves it.
So there's something in the collective conscious that this thing is about to be born, and it might spread up from any one of these creative avenues.
That's it.
And then they are the one who's
It's got to be a willing vessel and a portal through which it can become real.
Yeah. You hear that from, all my heroes, writers, composers say that it comes from somewhere else. I'm not writing it, I'm just catching it. I'm just putting a net out and I've got that one, there you go. Which is a lovely, there's a certain sort of humbleness to that as well. Like, you're sort of trying to not take the credit for being a smarty pants and being good, but I genuinely believe that they do think, as you're saying, there is somewhere else that it is being brought into this realm, this dimension from. Yeah.
To play devil's advocate, that there's examples across all of our existence where we've sought to explain the things that happen to us or the things that we see or experience, to explain them as it being from somewhere else, like the sun, the weather, the coming of the sea, the maybe there's a drought, we'll explain it as somebody else being involved in something. So we've obviously had there's a likelihood that we've explained most things through terms where we're expecting another to have been responsible for it. So is it not another one of those? And we don't, because we've been able to debunk the fact that the weather is not controlled by somebody else. Are we then able to follow the logic?
Yeah.
I'm just being a dick, but I mean, it's
No,
fun.
you're
It's,
saying
you know, you've
God-
got to
God-
offer the other
might
side of
disagree
it.
with you.
Yes,
They
of
might-
course.
God fills the gaps until that gap is filled by another scientific
we've been able to explain
discovery.
it.
Yeah. uh-huh.
That somebody else has done it, and it's come from somewhere else. So we've done that across history, haven't we? So could it be that? But we don't know way of knowing right now. So,
But then what you're saying, like you just reduce creativity down to the learning of patterns, the ability to manipulate things mechanically with your body, and just being able to access things at such a speed that they seem spontaneous, but actually what you're doing is just creating something from all the patterns that you've ever absorbed and stockpiled away, sort of thing.
I mean, I'd hate that to be the truth. I'm not saying that.
Well, it depends how literal you want to take
Yeah.
the physical act of creating pleasant or unpleasant musical sounds, isn't it? Like,
I think it can be reactive in a creative way. Your response to something, whether it uses a pattern to respond, it doesn't matter. It's still your human response to it.
Yeah.
It's just that you've used this vehicle that happens to conform to a convention or something. Use this vehicle to get it out into the world.
yeah,
Through an instrument, which necessitates a certain amount of organisation, because the drum kit needed tuning and this needed switching on. And
yeah,
yeah. Like, it is.
You
It's
see what I'm
an
saying, like,
interaction
how-
between those two things.
because part of it, like when you're a kid and you listen to music, you go, how the hell do you make these sounds? How did they? What even is that instrument I'm hearing on this record? And you get old and you learn, oh, that was like a sitar or something, or a spar mandolin, and it's
Playing the thing it normally plays.
Yeah, that's what that is.
Normally what that instrument does or something.
So
yeah.
that mystery and magic is suddenly, oh, that's the sound of a spar mandolin. Okay, so next time you hear it, you go, oh yeah, that's that from that George Harrison song. Yeah, that, I know that sound.
There's
So
a bit of that,
you're almost
yeah.
always learning and losing a bit of that magic and mystery, and it's trying to retain
Yeah.
that magic, really, isn't it? For me, anyway, that's something that I'm trying to still, despite having absorbed and learned and dissected and pulled apart, and you still want, because there is, like you say, there is still magic there when it all comes together in a certain way that you can't sort of formulaically describe in a way. And that magic happens particularly when there's a group of people playing together and it's this other thing in the middle of it, rather than just one guy's idea and everyone following the charts, or, we all know Burnout Girl, we know how this bit goes. If it's like, let's just make something and it exists in this little
I like this idea.
thing
yeah.
in the middle.
I like this.
Yeah, that's where the song lives,
Yeah.
not
Here or
here.
here or
It's
here.
right there, or,
Yeah, that's
and that's, that's not even constrained by time. That could be somebody does their parts and then you react to those parts at another point, you react to those parts at another point, and this thing exists,
turn-based.
So that's, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Turn-based jamming.
Temporarily displaced. Or temporarily displaced? Yeah.
Yeah, we're experimenting with temporal displacement in our jam today.
Yeah. So I'm gonna go home and then I'll see you.
I'll come in back next week.
Sorry, I got a bit metaphysical there.
I think, it's interesting because when you look at the instrument, like such as the voice, essentially, and the power the voice has as well, and like, I remember there's a because I love conspiracy theories. One of them is the idea that, because obviously we know that frequencies can like move objects, just even they vibrate when if you've got an oscillator and you went through the room, you got certain frequencies, things start to vibrate kind of thing. So there's this idea that if you get enough people to sing the same frequency, you can move objects, for instance. And there's this idea.
You're going to tell me they said the pyramids were built?
Well, this is it.
Get out.
There's an idea that the pyramids were actually moved by like hundreds of thousands of people doing the same frequency.
Really?
Chanting, yeah, which is kind of fascinating. Because
Wouldn't that be like really super low though to like
who
move something
knows?
of that size?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? I mean, I'm not saying I believe it or not.
We're not going to prove that.
We're not
today.
here to solve that one, no.
Play the lowest note you can. We're gonna get a
Okay.
granite block. Hold on.
So let's say that that's conceivable and that we can run with that. Does that go? Where do you take that? Do you go, okay, that's where music developed, or what can you do with that information? It's just pretty cool.
Well, traditionally music was always percussion, wasn't it? Originally, wasn't it mostly like very?
We were able to hit things and sing things before we were able to fashion instruments. Yeah.
Yeah.
But certainly vocal would have been
Some
you
things,
would be more likely to sing than hit something, probably, because it's a damn sight easier, isn't it?
yeah. I mean,
Or both probably. If you look at any indigenous music around the world, there's percussion and vocal before anything else.
and I wonder how much of the, oh, that's a pleasant sound reaction makes certain things develop and other things not, like dissonance and.
Yeah,
Because that's a thing that just exists, doesn't it? Like a major chord. Isn't that like removed from theory?
Well, I'm really fascinated by this concept because we'd probably assume that, and it is true to an extent, but certainly in the case of like a major or a minor third, both of those were considered dissonant up to a certain point in Western classical history. Before we had tighter scales that use shorter notes, like a scale that we'd know it now, like a major scale. We had in very early, when music was first being written down, we could see that people were like, monks and people like that were kind of singing in big fifths and octaves, big intervals, and they liked the way that sounded.
Consonant
that was consonant.
Sounds.
A third was like, not even like a weird, just two notes. A third, we'd say that's absolutely lovely now, wouldn't we? A third, but that was dissonant. Lots of other things were dissonant. So
the culture's changed around the music rather than
So I was keen to explore the idea of what is innate about music. Is there anything, or and what is a learnt association? What is cultural? Because we can go around the world and we can see hundreds of different scales that people base their music on. In Indonesia, it's a whole tone scale for gamelan music and things like that. In Africa, in much of Africa, it's a pentatonic scale, and that's how they've developed their melodies and stuff. And yet in Europe and then everywhere else we went and did our thing, it's a major scale and a minor scale and everything in between. And that's what's become accepted as sort of the standard for pop music. And it's just one example of a scale in one part of the world.
Yeah, that's fascinating. But it's the same as like the hertz you have it tuned to, isn't it? Like we use 440.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Things like that.
There's a whole argument about.
Is it 32? 432?
Is it 432?
Well, wasn't 440? Wasn't that supposedly developed by the military originally? Supposedly, yeah. I need to look into this more.
Well, 440 is the normal concert.
Yeah, that's what we.
That's what it's what
standard.
Unless you're James Taylor or I'm sure.
And then I think it was I've got 432 in my head. That was the slightly like.
Yeah. Was it an orchestral tuning in Europe or something?
I don't know, but like now, a lot of people say, "Oh, I only listen to stuff in 432. It's better for my health." Things like that.
Hey,
well, this is the thing. So
it might be true. This is the problem.
This is the next question in the sense of like, do you either of you believe that music or certain frequencies, have healing abilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I reckon so. I have not experienced it firsthand, but gong baths. Two of my friends went, and they both had very dramatically different experiences. And one of them felt like so relaxed and healed, and the other felt really on edge.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, and that's. It could be psychosomatic, but I don't know. I just feel like there must be something in it. Even just allowing the idea to permeate you. You're going to have a reaction, aren't you? So it'd be nice. I'd be interested to know if there's a thing, like a double-blind test or whatever, but like you're seeing certain frequencies having an effect physically on the body, not necessarily heard, audible frequencies. But is that what you were kind of saying before?
Yeah, definitely.
More.
Yeah, because I believe, and I mean even from the point of view from like when they remove kidney stones, they use a really low frequency to bash
to break
kidney
up
stones apart. And even if they can do that, then like I feel like a lot of our feelings are probably down to our stomach, and our stomach's very sensitive. So certain frequencies hitting that stomach will probably make us feel a certain way. It's like it. I think there's so much power in it. I personally believe that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Liam?
I'm skeptical. As I tend to be, but there's no way I can say that that's not happening, is there? But it's going to be in concert with so many other things. Like the amount of things we put in our body physically are surely making more of a difference to our state of physical well-being than what frequencies are knocking around. But
I mean,
they're everywhere, though, aren't they? The frequencies.
The extreme of that would be like. Have you ever stepped on like a power plate? Those exercise things used to be a real fad like 10 years ago or something, and they just vibrate you like Billy-O. And I used to feel so sick on them. And that's essentially what's happening. It's vibrating your particles, but obviously at a very very low, not low frequency, but low oscillation, because you can really feel it. So, you know, that's at a really microscopic level.
Yeah, I'd have to go same
not be.
as agnosticism, where it's like, I don't think so, but I'm open to be shown something different. So not even evidence-based. I was going to say any evidence-based stuff we can look at, I'd be very willing to look at it. But even just talking about it and thinking about it, like, I'm definitely interesting, isn't it? The idea that we know frequencies can move air and therefore move things, and everything has a resonant frequency, every object, every surface, every space, and we are in that space. Just seems a bit blunt as a tool, that it's just, we can move something. Move it where? How? What? Medically, where's the benefit to moving something or manipulating it with vibration?
Well, it's a bit conspiratorial perhaps, but I did see a video, so obviously pinch of salt's on YouTube, but it was talking about finding the frequency of like cancer cells and using ultrasonic audio to
destroy them. Well, that's, you see, I can accept that, because that's, again, blunt instrument. You can destroy something.
Yeah.
Can you improve its resilience? At fighting off infection, or more sophisticated maneuvers, let's say, than just getting rid of it.
Yeah.
That's where I think it might fall
The
down.
interesting thing is like we're built up of cells, aren't we? Like, you know, single cells. Everything is such that's living, and there was an experiment where they, again, I can't remember the name, unfortunately, some terrible names, but
You're going to put it on the bottom of the video, aren't you? After this,
I might, if I remember. But they put single cell organisms in the petri dish and moved it around to different environments, warm, cold, and it reacted to where it was, like even just a single cell organism. So if we're built up of, you know, I don't know how many millions or billions, you know, who's to say that music has an effect upon that, all those frequencies? So if we're listening to something, that means our whole existence essentially is being affected by that. Yeah. I think it's fascinating. Go on.
And we're made up of, like, a good percentage of our body is made up of our microbiome, or the bacteria that lives in us. There's a huge amount there's more bacteria in us than us, right? I think.
Yeah, there's more in you than me, because I've had a shower.
So, you know, maybe your bacteria actually prefers, you know, classical to heavy metal, and yours, like... Bacteria.
Sorry, guys. You knew what you were getting into when you invited me along. You did.
That's quick, though, isn't it? That was quick.
It was very quick. Okay.
It was...
May I ask you?
Yes, you may.
Why are you agnostic? And have you always been agnostic as well?
I think since I've been able to think about it as a rational thinking adult, I've never been religious, but that resulted in it just being a sort of an unanswered question. I hadn't thought properly about it until, I don't know, becoming an adult, I guess, and being able to sort of apply some proper reasonable thought, knowing myself properly, I think, was the difference. As to when you were a child, you know yourself less, so you take in the ideas of others more, and it was just easy to say I'm an atheist because everyone around me was saying they're an atheist. So, but having thought about it, it would be arrogant of us to assume that we know everything that can exist and that does exist. We don't. I can quite happily accept that. But then, well, this comes back to one of the things I said earlier, which is there's enough magic and unbelievable things in the known world that we know. To assume that there's like a God in inverted commas would seem a little bit short-sighted. It could be something even more fantastic that we don't know. We personify it, don't we? We give it a figure, give it a kind of a shape. We need a shape to our mysteries. So we call it religion or God, and then we organise cultures around that religion, and we all follow one deity, or we follow many deity, but it's still a kind of an organisation, isn't it? So also, to go further than the fact that it's I don't believe it until proven otherwise, part of agnosticism, I think I'd go further and say, I think that religion as it currently stands is a little weak, short-sighted. It doesn't really have enough imagination to account for what could be out there. I'd prefer that to think of it that way.
Yeah, organised religion is a very human-centric way of thinking about the vastness of the universe, isn't it? Because it's born of our development and our way of organising ourselves as
And it puts us in the
cultures.
centre, which
puts us in the centre, which
so much going on out there.
Well,
We're
so
probably
they
not that
used to
big a
think the
deal.
Earth was in the centre, don't they? Oh no, it's the sun in the
Yeah.
centre.
We still do that then, don't we? We still think we're kind of the centre of something.
I think
Even
even
if we don't say it.
I think you're a pretty special person if you don't, at your absolute core, still feel like the main character in the movie of your life. Do you know what I mean? Like that. And it's, you know, I it's something that I often think about. You know, I don't know that humanity will be able to progress into a better way of everything being arranged and organised and everyone cooperating. While that really, I think, is the core of, at the real core of everyone. I think you're an organism that is looking to, you know, survive and live, and of course that's going to come with, you know, self-preservation, sort of self-centeredness, not necessarily in an egotistical way, but just a practical way, you know. So
It is kind of crazy when, you know, that when you think about how crazy our own consciousness is from an individual perspective, and to think there's actually like 8 billion consciousnesses on this planet, it is kind of overwhelming, isn't it? When you think about the level of kind of information there, essentially, in a way.
Yeah. There's a lot of consciousness happening at one time, isn't there? It's mad.
Do either of you believe that we're all connected, that we all do kind of have a
it's going to sound weak, but I want to.
Yeah.
But I've never felt or experienced anything that's told me that's the case. But I think it's such a beguiling idea that we are all connected, and I want that to be the case. But like I say, the scientific approach and the scientific way of looking at the world, I've not seen something that tells me that's the case. You know.
Yeah.
But I think that's the only way that humanity will be able to continue on and thrive, is if that's the way we think about each other, as not each other, and just as.
We may see it in our lifetime now, you know, with the advances in AI, with the idea that we are already. We've been interfaced with computers. We're already been cyborgs for 10 years with mobile phones. We're so connected to the mobile phone that we are cyborgs already, essentially. So, and obviously they're already building chips. You know, they've done the first implant now, haven't they, last year?
Yeah.
So, you know, once you connect AI to the human brain, that's when it's like humanity. In my mind, it's kind of like, it scares the shit out of me, because I feel like the identity of everyone just ceases to exist. But it does connect everyone, and it gives us all one kind of, you know, the idea that we're all this one consciousness.
Like a technological ego death.
Yes,
Like humanity becomes one homogeneous planet of nodes.
Yeah, and it's sad, because I think that's what makes us special, isn't it? It's the bad things about us that actually make us good in some ways. You know, that gives us these characters and makes us interesting.
because you choose to either be a bad actor or a good person. Like, that's a conscious decision you make, so I think. Yeah.
Can I mean, you don't have to answer. Can I ask why you're an atheist? Like, why do you believe? Is there any reasons, or?
Well, like atheism, from my perspective, is the opposite of a belief. I've just been shown nothing that tells me, you know, there could be, you know, that, you know, which is a sort of scary, lonely kind of thought in a way. If we're just electrical impulses and, you know, meat robots walking around. So, but I can't get beyond that. Like, I just think you can always reduce things down to a quantifiable thing in the physical world, you know? So yeah, I've never had a religious experience, I think. So perhaps if something had happened to me where I was convinced, you know, and I wasn't brought up in any religion, and I think the organized religion aspect of the idea of there being a deity, I find so distasteful at times for the bad things that's happened. I mean, humanity wouldn't have got to where it has if it hadn't been for a religion, because it organized us in a way that forced us to be moral in a sense, because of you being watched. But I think as a civilized society, I think the choice to be good and to be a good person and to not be completely self-serving, I don't think you necessarily need religion to tell you that that is the right way to be. Yeah. So I've never needed to plug that into my way of thinking as well. So sorry to all the God lovers out there.
No, thank you for answering.
But I think Jesus is real and I think he's cool.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely historical figure.
No, I do believe Jesus was a real person. I do think there's too many things about it.
Yeah.
I'm not a Christian or anything, but I do think he must have been a real person of some sort.
A historical figure, yeah. And he had
That's
the right
a much
idea.
more reasonable position to believe, isn't he? Yeah, okay, yeah, this person existed, that's cool. He did what? Oh, I'm not sure he existed now because you're telling me he did all these things.
Well, yeah.
He existed. Yeah, cool. I'm absolutely happy to accept that. And that he was able to inspire a lot of people to follow in a righteous path. That's believable as well.
Yeah.
And we create metaphors so readily and so easily, and we compound things over time with metaphor that something that maybe did happen, like he was able to gather a lot of people or sort out some food for them or something, becomes canonized in a way that it becomes so far from the truth that it becomes a myth and it becomes an unbelievable truth, an unbelievable fact.
It's interesting, it has to have this supernatural, miraculous element to sell the idea that he's not just a guy. You know, like, if he said everything he said he was, and I'm the Son of God and I'm here to save you all, but didn't do any of the fantastical things, would people be like, no, you're not? But because in the story of it to sell it,
Well,
do you know
it's
what I
a
mean?
story that has been told and retold and retold. So what do we know about what the story was based on?
Yeah.
We don't. A historian might be able to tell you differently, but
And he was about, like, you know, love each other. That's the basic premise of my whole thing is be good to each other. Nobody's better than anybody else. You know, you love each other. And they're like, that's a great message.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's been a bit muddied over the years, don't you? Yeah. But that's a very opinion on organized religion way of looking at spirituality, which for me is kind of a different thing. Because you're talking about dimensions.
Yes.
And I think you must have seen like Flatland and how can we possibly conceive of like a 4-dimensional reality, because there's no way for us to experience that. You know, ad infinitum, 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions. And I think there's mystery and there's magic and there's something beyond in that way that we wouldn't be able to conceive of it anyway, were it to be true or real or affecting us, affecting our lives.
Yeah, but I think that's why I think it's amazing. Like the human experience in a way is such an amazing thing, because we're meant to have limitations. We're not meant to know it all. We're meant to be in a box, because if we know it all, if we knew everything, there'd be no point.
Yeah.
Because what's the fun in that? Like, the fun is learning and
novelty, new things, and
so, you know. I mean, I could go on about my beliefs, but we'll leave it there for now.
we didn't get to ask you, did we?
That's not what this is about. You know what I mean? This is.
Come back for the reunion and we'll just grill you about what
The last
what it's
one
all
you
about.
do of this, if there ever is a last one, will be several of us coming in and asking you questions.
Well, there's a really good video just called The Egg, and I think I might have sent it to you.
Oh, yes.
Maybe. The
Is
Egg.
it by the guy? It's the same guy who wrote The Martian.
No, I don't know.
It's basically. Well, you tell me.
The idea is that we're one big organism that splits off to basically become an individual, because we have to experience everything before we can transition or transcend to the next life, essentially.
Yeah.
So we're just like the fingers, essentially, of a big being.
I think you sent me this. No,
Well, I have to say it because it's one of those things that, like, you start watching that, but it kind of like it did resonate with me when by the end of it, I was like, oh, gee, maybe, yeah.
I think is it Andy Weir? The guy wrote it, and it's been animated in this video, I think, or something.
Yeah, it could be.
The idea being that the guy dies and he meets God, and he
That's
says,
it, yeah.
right, you're about to go back and do
Probably,
this
yeah.
again in a different.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it kind of puts together like past lives and all these things that you know, we're basically all the same entity or being, but we're just different
Experiencing
slices
life
of that, and just experience.
And the eventually, this organism has managed to experience every possible experience, and then off it goes into the next thing.
Basically, yeah.
I'd have thought it had got there by now. With it.
Well, the thing is
that
this is obviously
naive of me?
removed. This is obviously removed from the temporal dimension because it's going to, you know, we're all part of it, and we're living parallel lives. So it's removed from. So it both has been completed and we've transcended, and we're also just starting out on it as well at the same time.
Well, that's it. Because time only exists for us.
Yeah, because
When you
that's
get out
how
of
we.
that,
Yeah,
time doesn't exist. Everything is parallel. Like you said, everything is parallel. Everything's
everything
happening
exists
all at the
at
same
all times
time.
at once. Yeah,
Cool.
So
I fucking love.
it's mad in it. Yeah,
I love it. I think it's great.
I wonder, you know, you're talking we connect with the AI when we're all just one ginormous, basically, computer that's the size of the Earth because we're all, like, will we then have the capacity to possibly compute and experience things that are beyond our current human, you know, stimulus?
Well, I mean, if you talk to
No. The answer is no. Sorry, guys.
if you talk to, well, quite a lot of mathematicians believe that we are already in a simulation.
Yeah.
We're heading towards that way anyways.
Yeah.
That we will create a simulation of this paradise, and then we get bored and start destroying it essentially. And we're just in this loop of constant, and like statistically or mathematically,
Yeah.
it's more.
The chances of
More
us being
likely
in the
now that we're in a
base
simulation
reality.
than not.
Yes.
But then
I
all
read
that,
that, yeah.
all that really matters then is if they're going to switch it off. Because if it's so well, you know, created as it seems to be, everything seems to be on form.
Everything's working fine.
Yeah. The only real problem is if they just had to pull the plug. Them.
But no one's up there. Everyone's here. That's the thing. So the plug will never be pulled. We're just going to keep creating. It's like that Rick and Morty episode. You know, have you seen it?
Where the batteries and the old...
Yeah, he builds a society to build a battery, and then that society builds another battery.
Yeah.
It just goes on.
We're like 4 or 5 down.
Miniverse, and it gives a different name for each time, which is progressively more lame than the last name, isn't it?
Ugh.
All right, well, let's play some music.
Let's play some 5-dimensional jazz, guys.
So it's been beautiful to play and chat with you guys. Thank you so much. I hope everyone's enjoyed it watching as well. Is there anything you want to add before we finish?
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks for inviting me down.
Yeah, very nice afternoon out.
Blowed my mind. Nice chat.